Catchphrase was an enormous television show and, of course, its host, the man that dominated the whole thing. Before I introduce him on Talking Pints, let's have a look at a clip of him in action.
Say what you see, and you're about to see Mr. Catchphrase himself, Roy Walker!
Good evening and welcome to Catchphrase. Catch the money, catch the prizes, catch the holidays. I'll never forget the holiday I was on last year. The sun, the sand, the dancing. I was dancing with this very, very young lady and all her friends were all around. They were all clapping and I was kipping it all this year, you know. I said, do your friends think I'm in the groove? And she said, yes. They all think you've got one foot in it.
Roy, welcome to Talking Pints.
Cheers. Thank you for
inviting
me on the program.
Now, I'm not sure what to call you. By the way, not rude names, obviously, but do I call you TV presenter? Do I call you singer? Do I call you comedian?
Well, a lot of us started off as dance band singers. Manning was, Mike Reid was, Tom O'Connor was, and then jokes became very, very popular. So we met this fella called Johnny Hamp. And you couldn't get on the programme in the 70s unless you told jokes.
Yeah. And you've been telling jokes...
Ever since.
Ever since?
Yeah.
And do you
55 years, yeah.
But the trouble is, I've got friends who are comedians, and they all say comedy's getting harder and harder and harder. There are so many areas that you just can't tell jokes about anymore.
Well, of course, there's all that follows on as everything changes. Like music, you know, Swiftie, I mean, she'll earn more money this week than what Frank Sinatra earned in a lifetime. Yeah. And we don't know one song she sings, you know, but her fans do. Comedy moves on, and I always think that the comedians today would have been us if they had been born when we were born, and we would be them if we were born when they were born.
OK, so we adapt to the times, and our humour adapts with it, basically.
Yeah, you want to be a comedian. Yeah. You know, you have to move with the times.
Now, you know, Roy, growing up in Belfast, post-war Belfast, not a lot of money around.
No, no one had any money. You know, it was, we were known, I was a war baby. My mother surrendered, and you know, everybody was in the same boat. You didn't know how anything to measure it with, who was doing well, who wasn't, you know.
But you were out there, aged 11, trying to earn money, trying to do things. And I read that there was an inspirational figure in your life, a Mr. Corbett at school, who introduced you to...
Yeah, the science teacher, yeah.
Yeah, and so suddenly you were introduced to acting, you were introduced to comedy. Yeah,
and a little bit of magic and singing. And I got a real buzz from doing it. And I thought, you never know. So when I was 14, I was like a chorister in the cathedral. And then I was sort of discovered by a British choir that was passing through and went off with them. And I was on the Palladium when I was 14.
Wow.
You know, I was out of work when I was 15, waiting for an apprenticeship in the shipyard, where your voice changes. You know?
Yes, of course. And I guess the shipyards was the traditional route for people in Belfast.
They say 30,000 people there. Although, if you ask some of the people that owned it, they'd say only half of them worked.
Well, these days they wouldn't turn up at all. They'd work from home,
probably,
wouldn't they?
Yeah, probably.
And then 7 years in the army. Right.
Yes. Well, I was national service, and then I discovered athletics. I never did any sport at school, and I discovered athletics, and I became the Northern Ireland hammer throwing champion and what have you.
The Northern Ireland hammer throwing champion.
Yes, we didn't have guns in them days.
So you were obviously a very fit young man.
I was a PTI and what have you, and then I enjoyed it, and then I got married and had children and what have you, and decided I didn't want to be abroad. I'd been in the jungle for a year in Borneo, and I decided that I'd come out of the army and maybe go back into show business.
But I just spent 3 weeks in the jungle last time round, and that was long enough for me.
Yeah, it was long enough
for me. And kind of, you know, you marry Jean, and you come from different religious communities.
Yeah, yes.
And that was called a mixed marriage in those days.
Yes, she was a woman, and but we got along fine and what have you. And then, of course, the word got out that that was the way we were, and then the guys come around and what have you. Well, I never really talked too much about that there because there was so many people had far worse done to them than what I had. I lost my shop, I lost my house, I lost my car, but I didn't lose my wife and kids.
Yeah.
So we headed to England.
You were driven out.
Yeah. They call it ethnic cleansing. I think it's a very posh word for it. But I didn't mind. I was young. I was in my 20s and what have you. I'd just come out of Borneo. You've been 3 weeks in the jungle. You know, it didn't seem like it was such a terrible thing.
Well, but the Troubles were pretty awful, weren't they?
They were, for most people, they were horrible, horrible. You couldn't believe that things like that would happen. Yeah. But anyway, I got away and I had a tiny little bit of talent. I was welcomed into the northeast of England, which was clubland.
The friendliest part of England.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
They were so kind to me and tolerant. Some of the clubs were really, really difficult. But the worst thing about comedy is you can't learn unless you're doing badly.
Yeah.
You have to be dying.
I think, actually, that applies to most of life, doesn't it? We learn through our mistakes, and if we don't learn through our mistakes, we don't get anywhere.
You fall back.
And then, stunning success on New Faces.
I was very lucky in getting in a New Face. I met someone, Pat Mooney, you call him. He had been on New Face. He was on the Comedians and what have you. And he told me to write to and I found a great manager like the Brian Epstein of comedy. His name was Mike Hughes, and he had Freddie Starr and Russ Sabat and people like that, and Ken Goodwin. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And they all became big names, you know. I was very old. I was like 45. And he still took me on, and lucky, got a break.
Well, it works, and you go on to Catchphrase, vast audiences, lots of money.
Do you know, he said something which John K. Cooper came to see Russ Abbott, and I had a great night in the show at the BIC in Bournemouth. And he said, Roy's very good. He said, we haven't seen him on television for a long time. And Mike said, why didn't you give him a go at that game show that you got? And he said, oh, he's too slow and too quiet, you know? And Mike said the magic words, yeah, think of the money he'll save you.
Well, that may have been the case to start with, but you did very, very well out of all
It was
of
the
that.
easiest thing I ever did.
Was it?
You know, a game show host. Some people can do it, the presenting, and some people can't.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we're still trying here, Jacob, aren't we? But we're doing our best.
Yeah. The only thing is you leave your comedy behind. They don't want you to be the comedian, you know, like Bob Monkhouse and Tarby and all them. So it was becoming old-fashioned to tell jokes on game shows. They wanted to get into the money and the visitors and the prizes.
Yeah, I want jokes personally. Well, look, you know, most of our viewers will know Catchphrase, but some won't. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little reenactment is what we're going to do. And we're not stitching you up, Roy. I absolutely
Which one of you two is going to be Mr. Chips?
So I am going to put up 3 pictures here. Now, this is catchphrase. We're looking for political catchphrases, and we're not being unfair on Roy. Jacob is here as the backstop, and you're not in competition with each other. You're a team, and I will give some clues. So can we please have our first image? Right, now, Roy, what we're seeing here is a TV handset, remote, being handed from one person to somebody else who is grabbing it. Any thoughts?
Remote control.
Control is part of the political slogan.
Okay.
Control is part... If you think back to the referendum, what was one of the big phrases in the referendum about control? Jacob?
Let's take back control.
Take back control. There we are. Teamwork. Teamwork. Very, very good.
Well
remember, say what you see. Say what you see. Very, very important. Say
I've heard that before somewhere.
Right, let's have our second image, please. OK, now, this refers to a phrase from a Prime Minister not that long ago. And you can see strength here. Strength.
Yeah, he's Arnold Schwarzenegger, sort of poser.
Strength and it was, well, I'll give you a clue. It was Theresa May talked about being strong and, can you remember? No, she's not very memorable really, is she?
glad I didn't say that.
No. Jacob, of course, was a huge supporter of Theresa May. What is this image telling?
This is strong and stable.
Strong and stable, number 2.
Strong
Very
and
good
stable.
indeed. Right, now we now have the last image. Now this goes back, this image. Let's have a look, please. This image goes back to the speech.
U-turn? No.
Yes, you're at your very, yes. It's about turning.
No U-turn.
The lady's not for turning.
The
Well
lady's not
done.
for
Right,
turning.
very good indeed.
Smart
Excellent.
Mrs. Thatcher, that
Well,
was.
Exactly. Well, I think you did remarkably well there, I have to say. And Jacob, jolly helpful as well. Roy, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the programme.
It's great. Great to meet you and what have you.
And you must just love doing television.
I've been lucky enough to get into television and what have you. Love to do the comedians and love comedy. Yeah. You're lucky to find a profession that you love. Yeah. If you can do that, you know, life is so much easier.
Someone once said to me that if you find a job that you love, it's not work.
Absolutely.
Well, you're always smiling. I can't think of an image of you when you've not been smiling. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the programme.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.